So one of the great things about knowing how to use these tools when it comes to Gen AI, large language models, and all these things that encompass AI in general, is that we're able to do things that perhaps we weren't able to do before AI came to place. AI became the de facto tool. So imagine that you work for a company and you as a developer, for example, are given a task to build a very simple user interface that allows other departments to be able to converse, in this case, with data that is saved on a database. So essentially, instead of these other workers who may not know SQL, which is the query language used to interact with database, they will be able to use natural language to type queries and then be able to traverse or converse with data in a database. So they can ask, for instance, how much did the company make in 2023, or how many employees in the department X, Y, and Z went on maternity leave in the past 5 years. So these are queries that you would have to know SQL in order to interact with that data in a database. So with AI agents, we can actually interact with databases, which is very exciting. So in this video, I'm going to show you how to do that, how to create an AI agent that is able to accept natural language, so text, and then transform that into SQL, and then go and fetch data from a database and return back as text. So that is what we're going to be doing in this video, and let's go ahead and get started. Now we're going to talk about database agents. So we're going to create database agents essentially that will interact with SQL database. Okay, so what we'll do is we're going to transform the CSV file into SQL database, that is the agent will, and we're going to use OpenAI model, of course, and LangChain, and make a solid database agent. So the idea again is as follows. We have the agent and we have a client or a customer or a user. So a user will say something like this: show me the sales data for the last quarter. Notice that there's no SQL code here. It's just natural language, and that's going to be passed through the agent. Now the agent will be able to transform that query into select from sales where blah, 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 and then pass that through the SQL database, interact with it, extract the best data, process the results, and pass those results back. So that is in a nutshell what we have always wanted to accomplish in this course, and we are getting there. Okay, so now instead of CSV, we're going to interact with SQL database. So back to our folder here. So in our project, I'm going to right click and let's create a new file. Say SQL db agent.py, like this. And as always, we're going to import a few things right away. So most of it's going to be what we've already had. So let me go ahead and get everything here. So we have pandas and everything. Now we have imported this SQL Alchemy. So this will allow us to create the actual SQL engine, as you will see in a second here. Okay, and we're loading our environment variables, setting up OpenAI key. We've seen this many times. No need to repeat ourselves. And now what we'll do is we're going to do the same thing we did before. So in fact, let me go to the previous file, CSV agent, and I'm going to borrow some of this code. So let me just get this one here and paste it all in. So we're getting the read CSV file again. So next, I'm going to go ahead and import this create SQL agent, okay, from LangChain agents, and of course the SQL database toolkit. So all of this comes from LangChain community in this case here. So we have the LangChain core, in this case the main one, and I have the LangChain community, which has different classes and wrappers and so forth. And we also need this utility here from LangChain, which is the SQL database. So all of that is given. We don't have to write ourselves. That's the beauty of LangChain. Now, all of this is going to be used we're going to be using all of that in a second here. Now, what we want to do next is to, of course, we want to create a DB from CSV file. So we have extracted the data from our salaries 2023, exactly what we've been doing so far. And now we're going to, just for simplicity in this course, we're going to then extract all that information and create a SQL database. It's going to be SQLite, which is a lighter version of the full-blown SQL, but you get the idea. Okay. Now, in your case, of course, you most likely already have a database that you want to interact with, and so that's what you'll be using. But because we are simplifying things here, we are going to just generate one from our data CSV file. So for that, first we need to create the path to our SQL database. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. So it's going to be under DB, salary DB. So essentially it's going to create another folder called DB and pass the database name as such. Path, that is. So next we're going to create an engine to connect to the SQL database. Okay, so I have the code here and I'm going to change a few things so that things work for us. So the engine here, we're going to use the create method. Remember, that is being imported at the top here from SQL Alchemy. Okay, and so we're creating the actual engine. So this creates an instance of an engine that we can use to then pass the database file path, which we have here, and we have that object engine. And now we have the file URL, which is going to be data salaries 2023 CSV. So essentially, I'm going to this data and get this. All right. And again, I'm going to go and read from our PDF, from our CSV, which means I don't actually have to have this at all. So let's just delete that because that's redundant. Okay, so now we have our CSV file information read in, and then we use that DF. It has this toSQL function, which allows us to write records stored in data frame to a SQL database. Very simple. We pass just the name and the engine, which we created here. If we run this, we should be able to have the actual database. Now, let me go ahead and see if that works. I'm going to just go ahead and add this print out here that says database created and pass the DF data frame. Control C to stop if you still had Streamlit running. Okay, so now I'm going to say db agent.py. Let's run. Okay, we have some issues here. Okay, if you run into that error, what you need to do somehow is to make sure that we have this code here. Let me go back right below where we have the file URL. Make sure that you say to make sure that this directory is created if it doesn't exist. Somehow that was an error that I'm getting, so make sure you add this. You will have access to this code anyway, and so yes, make sure you have that. Okay, so let's go ahead and run this. If all goes well, we're going to be able to see that we have our directory created there. So let me go ahead and run. Okay, so you can see now we have this DB created and says salary.db. So it was created. You should see that message that says that was created. And of course, it is all here. The other thing you can do actually, because of what I have installed, you can actually see this database that it has something. How? Well, let's go to our extensions here and I'm going to find SQLite Explorer. That's what you need. I'm going to click on that. Make sure if you want to see what I'm going to show you here that you have SQLite Explorer and Query SQLite databases installed as an extension. And once you have that, all we're going to do is say Command-Shift-P to open this palette here. And you can see that we have the SQLite Open Database. So you can search for it, SQLite, to find Open Database. Okay, so click, and then it will allow you to choose the database you want to look into. So in this case, it populates this one here, which is exactly this one. So I'm going to click. And once you do that, you can see at the bottom here, I'm going to close this down. I'm going to open this Explorer. And you can see that we have a SQLite database. I'm going to open and you can see we have this table. Now, if I click on this button here, run, and what do you see? You can see that indeed we have our SQLite table that was created. So of course it minimizes the amount of items that are being shown here, but that's okay. And you have it. So we have a database that was created from our CSV file. Okay, very well. So what we were able to do here, so we're able to extract from our CSV file and create an actual SQL database with a table and everything using the toSQL function, as you see here. All right, so now that we have our database created, our SQL database created, and again, remember, you can actually connect to your own database. This is just for simplicity here. Now let's go ahead and create the SQL agent, and we were able to do that using LangChain, and you can see that I can use this SQL database, right, to create an actual agent. And I'm going to use SQL database as such and say from URI, and we're going to pass the database file path. And then what we'll do is we need to create the actual toolkit. The toolkit is going to be the SQL database toolkit, which will allow us to then pass the model and the actual DB object. So there we go. So we use the SQL database toolkit. Notice that all of that is imported here, okay, from LangChain community SQL toolkit. So notice we have to pass the database that we instantiated here from our database file path, and we have to pass, of course, the model. They always go hand in hand. So let's go ahead and create the actual SQL agent. So SQL agent, I'm going to use create SQL agent function, and then allows me to pass a few parameters, one of which is the toolkit. We need to pass toolkit because it knows what needs to be done because we're passing the actual database and the large language model. And so we also need to pass explicitly the LLM, which is the model again, and I'm going to say verbose to true just to see. So for now, let's just keep it this way, agent here, and I can just use it and say dot invoke, and I can pass the query that I want. Okay. So I already have a question here that we can use and just put it at the top. So how many employees are in ABS 85 administrative services and their average salaries, and also how many of them are female, just as an example. So then I'm going to pass here the question, that question. Okay, let's go ahead and say res and see what will happen. Let's go ahead and print. All right, let's go ahead and run this real quick. So you can see now is entering the new execution and start thinking. It will take a little bit. So now it went through the whole process, but look at the beauty again. This is just really, really amazing and cool. So it says here we need to gather information about employees in the ABS 85 Administrative Services Department, including total number, average salaries, and the number of female employees. So it goes through the action and everything. Action input, we need to first check the tables available in the database to see which tables contain information about employees and so forth. And then we have, of course, the action SQL database list tables. Going to go ahead and list those tables, right? And found that information in action SQL DB schema, and then action input salaries 2023. So now it's going to go ahead and say create table salaries, go to department division, and everything creates that. And then 3 rows from salary 2023 table. So you got 3 rows that are needed for us to get that information, because there's only 3 rows from the question, which is how many employees are in the ABC 85 administrative services and so forth. Okay, it got that information. It says now that we have the information from the salaries 23 table created, we can proceed to write a query to retrieve required data. And it writes that query. So all of this is the agent writing SQL query that we don't have to write. Very good. It does all it needs to do and selects the count. Now it's looking at the count because we want to know how many employees are in that department. And went ahead, did what it needs to do, and found 3 rows again. So it always goes back and forth until it finds the matches. It says the field names in the table match the query. So I need to adjust the query to correctly count the number of employees and female employees in the AB85 administration department. It does all that work again. All of this is happening in the background. The agent is doing all of this and does the calculations again and find all that information, compile all of that information, goes back to select, count, and do all the things that it needs to do. All of that is happening in the background, okay? Until it then knows the answer. It finds that select, count, average base salary, when gender is F for female or gender F, then 1 else and so does all of this, writes all of this itself to find the information. And then later it says, because now this happens, how many employees are in the ABS 85 administrative service and their average salary, and also how many of them are female. Output here, agent stopped due to iteration limit or time limit. So this is very customary to happen because of depending on the kind of question and the things that the agent needs to do, and also the restriction of tokens and so many other things from the large language model. And so even though we didn't get the actual answer we wanted, but you can see that it's working in that it is actually interacting with the database. Okay. Now, how can we do to make this a little bit better, or to actually not end up with this answer that is not very helpful to us because we just want the actual answer? For that, what we'll do is we're going to train, quote unquote, our agent in a way with prompts to make sure that it knows exactly what it needs to do, just like what we did before. So I already have all of that information, and I'm going to just get it and put it here so you don't watch me doing all of this. Right above here, I'm going to paste some information here, some code. So essentially here I have this MySQL agent prefix. You are an agent designed to interact with SQL database. I give it a lot of information, given an input question, create syntactically correct. And this will be more apparent later. Don't worry about it. So essentially we're saying always limit your query to at most top K results. So all of these we're going to be passing along in a second here, all these variables, okay, input variables. Okay, never query for all the columns for a specific table. So I am directing, these are the instruction agent prefix. That way we most likely going to avoid having the issues that we just saw. Okay, do not make up any answer. We've seen this before, all that information. Okay, and then we have this agent format instruction because we want to format certain things. Use the following format: the input question you must answer, the thought, all of this. So this is just the thought, action, input, observation, and repeat end time. So essentially it's telling you what it needs to do. Okay, and we even give them an example, final result that we want, and you can always change this to something that makes sense to you. Okay, so now that we have all that information here, what we can do in our question, I can just pass first, before I pass the question, I can just say the prefix plus, let me just put this before, like this. So now I have, just like we did before, we have the question in the middle, we have the prefix first, and then the question, and then the agent formatting. In fact, let's go ahead and save this and run it real quick and see what will happen. So now we can restrict or guide our agent even better. Let's go ahead and run. Hopefully this time we can get the actual answer. And voila. You can see we got a lot of information here. You are an agent designed, so it is giving all that. But most importantly, the final result here, it says there is one female employee in the ABS administration with an average salary of this much. Okay. And you can see that it showed me the entire payload of the answer because I asked it to, and we have that answer there. Okay, the final result. So you can see now it went ahead because I gave it a little bit more of direction to our agent and our large language model. It was able to do exactly what we instructed to do. Now, this is just an example. You can always, as I say, change what you see here, the explanations, everything. You can change all of that. If you don't want to see explanations such as this, you can change that to your liking. Okay, this is just an example. The last thing we're going to do here is we're going to make it even better. So if you look at our agent here, when we say create SQL agent, we can pass a lot of different parameters or arguments along to make this even better. The other thing we're going to pass, so essentially I'm going to go ahead and get you everything here. I'm going to paste everything. So now you can see that we can actually pass the actual prefix and suffix and instructions inside of the agent instead of doing this. So now I can just remove all of this, right? I just want to show you. I can remove all of that and pass that inside of our create SQL agent. So you can see for prefix, we pass the prefix there. Format instruction, we pass the agent format instruction, which we create at the top. And we have the model, of course, the toolkit, and the top 30, which is the number of rows to query for by default. And verbose, of course, is to show the executor verbosity, to say we want to see what the agent is doing and it's thinking. So now I just do the same thing and let's see what's going to happen. And remember that this is LLM, meaning we are dealing with large language models. Sometimes results may differ. So that is the point. But most likely, it's always going to give us the correct result. Okay, so it's going to do the same thing. Okay, it gives us the same result, which is there is one female employee in the ABS 85 administrative services department with an average of this amount salary. All right, very good. So I can go back and change the question. Say, for instance, what is the highest average salary by department? I can say, and give me the number. Okay. Again, we're going to go and run. And look at this. It went through the whole process again, and I will leave that to you again to look through and see the thought process the agent went through. We have the actual SQL here being written, and it goes through the whole process. And in the end, we have the actual answer, which says IGR with an average salary of that amount. We're going to use Streamlit to have some sort of a user interface just for fun. So I have the code already. We're importing Streamlit and we passing in a title, enter your query here. That's the text input. And we're making sure that we call the SQL agent and pass in the question that comes in. And let me just get rid of that. It's not necessary. And then we're just getting the output to enter to show. Okay. If there's a problem, I'm going to say, please enter a query. Okay. Very simple. Let's go ahead and run a Streamlit app now. And there we have it. So I'm going to enter a query real quick. Let's run. To our code here, you can see things are being calculated. It looks like it was finished. If you go back here, you can see the average salary of employees making over 100,000 is 123. So, but it didn't quite understand what I wanted to say, but it's okay. How many employees make over 100,000 on average? I can say, give me the employees count, something like that. Maybe that's going to help. Sometimes you have to tweak your question a little bit more. Okay, looks like there are 6,954 employees who make over 100,000 on average. Okay, that's very good. So you can now ask any question that you want. You can say, how many employees get overpay? Look at that. There are 3,475 employees who are getting paid more than 100,000. All right, that's okay. I have another question here I can paste. So what is the maximum overtime pay received by any employee? And again, if you go back here, you can see it goes and starts to look as it runs, right? And voila, there's the answer, which is exactly, we can go back here and see that is the answer because it went through the process of finding that answer. And did exactly what we wanted to do. It writes SQL code and gets that information. This is so fun. I'm going to do another one real quick here. By the way, I'm going to give you a list of all these questions so you can play around with. Okay, so looks to total base salary paid by the entire organization is a lot of money. All right, so there you go. There you have it. You have all set up now. You're able to create your SQL database AI agent to allow you to actually interact with the database, which is huge because you can see how easy it is for us to interact with our database using natural language. So you query, you ask question, and then all of that is transformed through the agent and the AI, in this case, the model, large language model, to then create in the background, agents able to convert this query into a SQL query, essentially, that then is used to interact with the database and then extract that information, process it, and then gives us the result. So we just finished putting together a database agent that allowed us to interact with SQL database. So we were able to transform CSV files into SQL database. Now, the idea really is that you will have your own SQL database that you want to interact with. Okay, but at least you know how to do that now. So we use OpenAI model, of course, LangChain, and finally we created a UI with Streamlit so that we can see something visual on how to pass queries and let the underlying agent do all the work. So this is it. This is really how simple it is to create agents, in this case database agents, that are able to interact with SQL database. Now, what I want you to do before you move forward is to actually implement this using your own data and make sure that you understand how to tweak or how to add more directions, in this case in the form of prefix instructions or prompts. That way your agents are efficient in what they are supposed to do and they know exactly what they need to do. So that is also very, very important to keep in mind. All right, thank you so much, and I'll see you next. Very good. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope this was helpful, and I hope you were able to see the things that are possible with the tools that we have by creating AI agents that communicate with SQL databases. Now, we talked about SQL databases. Now, it could be any kind of databases because you can use the same concepts that you learn in this video and plug them into different use cases. So that is the point of learning these technologies, is that we can take what we learn and actually implement in our businesses, organizations, and so forth. So if you liked this video, if this was useful to you, make sure to share with maybe somebody else who would find this video interesting and useful. And if you're not subscribed, I would appreciate if you did subscribe because there's a lot of content here. Now, this was very short. This is actually part of a larger course. If you're interested in diving deeper into database AI agents and so forth, I will leave a link in the description where you can go and check it out. Thank you so much for your time, and till next time, be well.